Some moments are never meant to be heard. Some words are spoken only to release pain, not to change a life. That night the house was quiet. Too quiet. A man who had everything money could buy stood still after hearing a single sentence whispered through tears. A sentence filled with desperation, love for family, and fear of being left behind. He had spent years believing loneliness was the price of success. She believed loneliness was the cost of responsibility. Neither of them knew that one overheard moment would force a choice that could shatter comfort, expose buried wounds, and awaken emotions both had learned to bury. This is not a story about wealth. It is a story about being seen for the first time. About courage that appears at 3 a.m. And about how one unexpected decision can turn quiet suffering into a future filled with warmth, hope, and love. Listen carefully. Because this story proves that sometimes the heart hears what the ears were never meant to catch. The house breathed silence the way a cathedral does after midnight. Soft lights reflected off polished floors, and the city beyond the windows glittered without warmth. Inside, everything was ordered, perfect, untouched by chaos. He had designed his life this way. Control meant peace. Or so he believed. As he moved through the hallway, lost in thoughts he never allowed himself to finish, a voice slipped through the quiet. It was not loud. It was not meant for him. It trembled, carrying a weight that did not belong in a place like this. "I do not know what else to do," the voice whispered. "I just need someone to stand beside me." He stopped without realizing it. His hand rested against the wall, his breath shallow. The words were followed by a pause, then a shaky inhale, the kind that comes before tears spill no matter how hard they are held back. "I am tired of pretending I am strong all the time," she said softly. "I just need someone. Even if it is only for one day." The sentence hung in the air, fragile and exposed. It did not sound like complaint. It sounded like surrender. He had walked past her every day for years. Polite greetings. Quiet efficiency. No questions asked. No boundaries crossed. She was part of the routine, as invisible as the furniture, as dependable as the walls. Yet in that moment, her voice cracked open something he had kept sealed inside himself for far too long. A faint sob followed. Quickly silenced. As if she was ashamed of even feeling it. His chest tightened. Not with pity but recognition. The kind that arrives uninvited and refuses to leave. He had heard that same ache before, echoing in his own empty rooms late at night when success felt heavy instead of triumphant. He should have walked away. He knew that. This was not his burden. Not his place. Not his responsibility. But his feet refused to move. In the stillness, a thought formed slowly, dangerously. What if this moment was not an accident? What if hearing those words was not a mistake but an invitation? And what if doing nothing was no longer an option? The silence returned, thicker than before, carrying a question neither of them had asked out loud. The silence did not fade after her voice disappeared. It settled deeper, pressing against his thoughts until sleep became impossible. He lay staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move like slow waves, replaying every word he had heard. Not because of curiosity but because they felt familiar. Too familiar. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed softly. He imagined her sitting on the edge of her bed, shoulders curled inward, trying to become smaller than her worries. He had seen that posture in mirrors. Late nights. Early mornings. The weight of expectation resting on a single pair of shoulders. Hours passed. The clock glowed faintly, marking time he could not escape. Each minute sharpened a question he did not want to answer. Why did those words matter so much? Why did they stay when every other concern faded? Just before dawn, he rose and walked into the kitchen. The room felt different at this hour. Honest. Exposed. He poured coffee but did not drink it. His reflection stared back from the dark glass of the window. A man admired by thousands and known by no one. Footsteps sounded behind him. He turned slowly. She froze in the doorway, eyes swollen, movements careful, as if one wrong step might break something fragile. For a moment, neither spoke. The air tightened. Her gaze dropped to the floor, bracing for questions, for judgment, for consequences. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "You should not have heard that." He surprised himself by shaking his head. "You did nothing wrong." The words felt heavy, deliberate. They opened a door he had never allowed himself to touch. She looked up then, confusion flickering across her face. He saw fear there but also hope she did not dare to name. "I was awake all night," he continued. "Not because of what you said but because I recognized it." Her hands trembled slightly. She pressed them together, trying to hide it. He took a breath. One step forward. Another. Each one carried risk. "There may be a way I can help," he said softly. "But only if you trust me." Her heart pounded loud enough that she wondered if he could hear it. She nodded, not because she understood, but because something in his voice told her this moment mattered more than either of them knew. And somewhere between uncertainty and courage, a decision began to take shape that would change everything. She did not answer right away. Trust was not something she gave easily. It had been chipped away by years of choosing duty over desire, silence over honesty. She studied his face, searching for something familiar, something steady. What she found instead was uncertainty that mirrored her own. "What kind of help?" she asked, her voice barely above a breath. He hesitated. In that pause lived every reason this was a terrible idea. Power, position, consequences. The rules he had built his life on warned him to step back. But another voice, quieter and far more dangerous, urged him forward. "I heard what you said about your family," he replied. "About needing someone beside you." Just for a moment. Her eyes widened. Color rushed to her cheeks. She wrapped her arms around herself, shame and relief colliding in her chest. "It was nothing. I was just talking. I did not mean for you to get involved." "I know," he said gently. "That is why I am offering without conditions." He moved to the table and pulled out a chair, inviting her to sit. She obeyed without thinking, heart racing. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves were listening. "What if," he began slowly, "I went with you? Only as support. Nothing more. No explanations. No expectations." The words landed between them, heavy and unreal. Her mind struggled to catch up. This was not possible. Men like him did not step into lives like hers. They did not risk their carefully built worlds for someone who worked quietly in the background. "You do not have to decide now," he added, sensing her fear. "And if you say no, I will forget I ever heard a thing." She swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed to run. To protect herself from hope. Yet another part of her whispered that this might be the only time someone chose her without needing anything in return. The clock ticked loudly, counting down seconds that felt permanent. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing through the fear. "When would this happen?" she asked. He met her gaze, steady and honest. "Whenever you are ready." In that instant, both of them understood that whatever choice she made, nothing would ever be the same again. The journey began quietly. No grand promises. No rehearsed words. Just two people sitting side by side, carrying questions neither knew how to voice. Outside the window, the city faded into long roads and open skies, and with every mile, the distance between their worlds grew thinner. She kept her hands folded in her lap, staring at the passing landscape. He noticed how she straightened whenever his gaze lingered, as if afraid to take up too much space. The silence between them was careful, fragile, yet not uncomfortable. It felt like the pause before something meaningful finds its voice. At a small stop along the way, they shared coffee in chipped cups, standing close enough to feel each other's presence without touching. She laughed once, surprised by the sound of it herself. He smiled not because it was charming but because it was real. That laugh stayed with him long after they returned to the road. As the day stretched on, pieces of truth slipped out. She spoke of home, of expectations wrapped in concern, of love that sometimes felt like pressure. He spoke of work, of success that never quieted the ache inside, of nights spent in rooms too large for one heart. Their words met in the middle, weaving something neither had planned. When they finally arrived, the air felt different, softer. The place held memories she was not ready to face. Her steps slowed. He noticed the tremor in her breath, the way her shoulders tightened. "You can still change your mind," he said gently. She shook her head, eyes shining with emotion she tried to hide. "I have spent my life turning back. Not today." In that moment, the arrangement stopped feeling like an act. It became something deeper. Something dangerous. They had crossed a line neither could see, and the realization settled quietly between them. That night, as lights dimmed and voices filled the space around them, both felt the same unspoken truth. Pretending was no longer the hardest part. The hardest part would be remembering where the act was supposed to end. The room was filled with familiar voices, laughter woven with expectation. Faces turned toward them with curious smiles, measuring glances, quiet judgments. She felt every look like a weight pressing against her chest. Her fingers curled slightly, searching for balance. Without a word, he reached for her hand. The contact was brief, respectful, yet grounding. Warmth spread through her palm, steadying the storm inside. She looked up at him, surprised by how natural it felt, how safe. Not staged. Not forced. Just present. Questions followed, wrapped in polite concern. How they met. How long it had been. Where he was from. She answered carefully, rehearsed lines flowing as planned. Yet something shifted as she spoke. Each sentence felt less like a performance and more like a truth she wanted to believe. Across the room, her parents watched with cautious hope. Relief softened their expressions. The tension she had carried for years eased slightly, like a knot finally loosening. She caught her mother's eye and saw gratitude there. Not pride. Not expectation. Gratitude. Later, when the noise faded and night settled in, she stepped outside alone. The air was cool, sharp with memories. Her breath caught as emotion rushed in all at once. She pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed by the day, by how close everything felt to falling apart. He followed, stopping a respectful distance away. You did well, he said quietly. She shook her head, tears shining. I do not know where pretending ends anymore. His words came after a pause, measured and honest. I was thinking the same thing. They stood there in silence, the space between them charged with feelings neither had planned for. This was no longer about helping. It was about facing something real that had grown without permission. She wiped her tears and met his gaze. When this is over, she asked softly, what happens to us? He did not answer right away. The truth deserved time. Inside, laughter echoed. Outside, two hearts hovered on the edge of a question neither was ready to ask aloud. Morning arrived gently as if it knew how fragile everything felt. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, warming the quiet room. She stood by the window watching the day begin, her thoughts heavy yet calm in a way she had not felt in years. For the first time she was not afraid of what came next. Footsteps sounded behind her. He stopped beside her, leaving space, always careful not to push. The night before had been full of unspoken truths, but the morning carried something different. Clarity. I do not want to pretend anymore, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Not with them. Not with myself. He nodded slowly. Neither do I. They returned inside together, not hand in hand but aligned in purpose. When they spoke to her family, there were no elaborate explanations. Only honesty. About how they met. About why they came. About how unexpected kindness had grown into something neither of them planned. There was silence at first. Then her father smiled, weak but sincere. All I ever wanted, he said softly, was to know you are not alone. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, not of disappointment but relief. In that moment, the weight she had carried for years finally lifted. Later, as they prepared to leave, she turned to him, uncertainty flickering once more. You do not owe me anything, she said. I know, he replied. That is why I am staying. The words settled between them, simple and true. No grand promises. No dramatic declarations. Just a choice made with open eyes. Back in the city, life resumed its rhythm, but something had changed. Dinners were no longer silent. Laughter found its way into rooms once empty.